Hey guys, and welcome back to the ASX Investor channel, and welcome to another CEO interview. Today, we are very excited to be bringing to you the story of Calix. Calix is a fascinating company. They're playing right on the intersection of a range of different technologies and thematics that are really going to drive the next generation. We know that as a society, we're moving towards a decarbonized society. There's a big focus on renewable energy, the opportunity to do things in better ways. And Calix have really developed a sustainable technology platform that enables them to provide a range of different materials and solutions. Today, we'll be unpacking them all with the CEO, Phil Hodgson. Phil, it's been a massive past week for you. Congratulations, really over the past few years. Looking forward to talking to you all. Welcome to the channel.
Excellent. Thanks very much for having me today, and always love to talk about the Calix story, so looking forward to it.
There is so much to unpack, so many different pieces of news, but I think maybe just starting at that first level, who is Calix and really what is that problem that you're trying to solve?
Yeah, well, who is Calix? We're just an Australian startup technology company. We've just got a new way to heat stuff up. So it's just a new type of kiln. Heating stuff up is used in mineral processing and chemical processing. But this interesting little Australian invention is being used overseas in Europe to help separate the CO2 when you make cement. We're looking at applications with companies like Pilbara Minerals to make lower carbon lithium. And so there's all these interesting different applications of just the one core simple concept, which is how to heat stuff up in a better way.
I love the tagline. It's quite a bit humorous, but it also really speaks to the mission that you're going on. Mars is for quitters. Can you just elaborate on what that means and why it's at the core of your mission?
Yeah, so Mars is for quitters is sort of originated when we were trying to think of something to, I guess, differentiate ourselves a little bit. And it was put forward as a bit of a joke originally, believe it or not, because Elon Musk, of course, is known as a great technology pioneer. But with a bit of Aussie humour, we thought, well, Mars is for quitters might be an interesting tagline. But as we laughed, but then thought more about it, it became apparent that there's a reasonably good, serious message behind it. And while we're not trying to denigrate anything Mr. Musk does, it's a nice little line that sort of reminds us all that we've got to do something about this planet as well, not just dream of moving off to the next one just yet before we really have a serious fix up of the current one we've got.
And I'm sure everyone is familiar now with the acronym ESG. We've really seen it start to pick up in terms of importance and really the understanding. Not only is it now a key theme for the broader society, but I think investors are also looking at it as an opportunity as well to get involved, to really make a difference with their investments. I'd love to just hear of some of your reflections and the trends that you're starting to see as well play out.
Absolutely. And funny enough, if you'd done this interview 9 to 12 months ago, I would have been still in the, oh, it's going to happen stage. Well, today we're in the it's happening stage. ESG, probably most people didn't even know what it meant 12 months ago, but of course, environment, social and governance investing is the theme. And it's not just a passing fad. Most people are sort of saying it's the theme of the decade or longer. And so, the commitment by countries and companies and now investment funds and pension funds to only invest in net zero CO2 type technologies and type of companies or companies with those targets is really gained huge momentum just within the space of 12 months. And so obviously a little company like Calix with what we're trying to do is really starting to benefit from those tailwinds. So yeah, that's how we sort of see ESG. It's a recent, but it's going to be a long playing phenomenon.
And that, of course, leads us to Calix. The CXL story is a fascinating one. You have got a patented and proprietary technology, really enabling you to heat things differently to the current use cases. I'd love for you to just break down how you've reinvented this 5,000-year kiln process and what it really means.
Yeah, no problem at all. In fact, I was doing some reading this morning and I realized that the 5,000-year record, there's kilns 8,000 years old. So it goes back even more. But with a kiln, most people sort of realize you put what you're trying to heat, you put some fuel in there and you light a match. And a simple explanation, of course, it hasn't been done. It's been done much the same way for 8,000 years now. What we do is a little different. And I usually like to use my little toilet roll to separate it out here. So we apply the heat to a big steel tube on the outside, and the actual steel tube we use is a bit bigger than this. It's about 1.8 meters in diameter, anywhere from 24 to 36 meters high. So it's a rather large tube. And we just heat it from the outside. And then whatever we're trying to heat up is on the inside. and we grind whatever it is we're trying to heat up into reasonably small particles. So like imagine holding a lump of flour in your hand and then just dropping that flour to the floor and watching it float down. Well, that's all that's happening inside a tube. We drop whatever we're trying to heat up inside the tube, and we heat the tube from the outside up to about 1,000 degrees centigrade. And then the radiative heat from the red walls of the tube is what goes into the powder. You probably anticipate your next question, why do it that way? Well, when you're heating up cement and lime, for example, when you're making cement and lime, you're using limestone, and half the weight of a lump of limestone is CO2. And of course, when they heat it up, that CO2 comes out, gets mixed with their flue gases, goes out to the atmosphere. 8% of global CO2 emissions from the cement and lime industries, and 2/3 of those emissions from the rock, from the limestone. Of course, with our kiln, we're heating it from the outside. The limestone's in the middle bit, and so the CO2 that comes out is contained and then comes out the top as a pure stream, ready for utilization or sequestration. So it's just a different type of kiln, believe it or not, heated externally, separates the CO2 directly, and so it's a neat way for the cement and lime industries to help mitigate their CO2 emissions.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to hear. And I've heard you speak about some of the other benefits as well. It's heat source agnostic, which of course we know about the renewable energy transition coming up, and also has the ability to produce some really highly active materials as well. We'd love just to hear you elaborate on those and what those mean for a few of the other industries.
Yeah, and this is what makes the technology so versatile is, apart from just cement and lime, if we can put all sorts of things in the top. We're developing sort of some interesting battery materials, just putting manganese in the top. And of course, with no furnace gases sort of touching the particles themselves, and the particles themselves are only flowing through in a very short period of time, just a few seconds, so they don't get burnt or sintered. We can make very highly active materials, and that's the source of the interest in some of the battery materials we're producing. And we're also looking at materials in biotech and water and these sorts of industries as well. And then, as you mentioned, we don't care how we heat. We can heat with gas, we can heat with biomass, we can heat with waste fuel, we can heat with electricity, so renewable electrons. So it's a way for industry to assist them decarbonize as well. So it's a very versatile kiln.
There's so many different avenues, and I'd love to unpack all of them, but maybe starting with the flagship CO2, the carbon mitigation opportunity that you've got with LEILAC. Of course, there was a big piece of news this past week, but maybe if you can just set the scene of what the project actually is and obviously what it could mean moving forward for the story.
Yeah, look, LEILAC is our little acronym for low emissions intensity lime and cement. So there you go. We always have to put things in acronyms, don't we? But that particular application, the technology we're developing in Europe, we've got a plant that we've been running since 2019. It's at a Heidelberg cement site in Belgium, and that's about taking about 5% of the slipstream of a full-scale cement plant. Even that's 25,000 tonnes a year of CO2 capacity, just 5% of the slipstream. And we've been running that plant for 2 years. We've proven the technology works, so we're getting nice pure CO2 at the top. The tube hasn't collapsed, melted, fouled, done anything like that, so it's operationally robust, and it's sort of doing everything that we hoped it would do. And Heidelberg Cement and Cemex and the EU, in fact, as well, were pleased enough with the performance of the technology to give us further funding. And we're going to be building something 4 times the size, so 4 of these tubes in a furnace at a Heidelberg cement plant in Hanover. Now, that will be 20% of the throughput of a full-scale cement plant, or even a large-scale lime plant in and of itself. And that's targeted for startup late 2023, early 24, 100,000 tonnes per year CO2 separation capacity. And so in the space of a few short years, you're starting to see how we're scaling the technology up ultimately to a full-scale plant, which hopefully we've got a few projects starting to start from that time on. And we've already got a pipeline that's starting to fill with companies interested in having a look at the technology for that. So we've got some good partners. We've had some great funding from the EU, and we've got a pipeline that's starting to build.
Of course, that validation from the EU is significant, but over this past week, there was some further validation, a 7% stake from Carbon Direct. I'd love to just hear your thoughts on what that investment really means, and continuing moving forward, the opportunity to continue to scale that, what that really will help to deliver.
Yeah, no, look, it's if I had to class the deal, it would probably be the most important since we IPO'd the company. The first thing it does, as you say, is It validates the technology. We've been through a process where we've looked at several impact funds to come on board and join us on this journey to commercialise. They've done months of due diligence on the technology and made this investment into the technology. 15 million euro for 7% stake. So that starts to put a value benchmark around the technology as well, which is also very important for us. And the structure of the deal is also really important for people to understand. We've got an equity value, but we've also got a separate part of the deal, which is a licensing and IP stream. So whatever equity we own in the company, we're still going to continue to earn 30% of the license and royalty incomes from the technology. And the other part that makes this deal really important for us is that that's the way we're going to be doing other applications of the technology as well. We're going to be looking at equity farm-in and license type arrangements, because as a small Australian technology company, we're not a big cement and lime player. We're not a battery player, but this is the strategy for the company to be able to use the technology in all these different things. We get these types of investments and partners in at the right time to really accelerate the commercialization journey. So several reasons why this is a really important deal.
Yeah, that's really exciting. I was going to ask about the potential routes to market for the other pillars that you have, but it seems like this is going to be that kind of route to market that you'll continue to pursue. Do you have any considerations about taking products all the way through, or is it mostly going to be this current format?
It'll mostly be this current form. I think there'll be slightly different business models or structures for those different lines of business. But as I say, as a technology first company, we're not going to be in crop protection or batteries or these sorts of places. So we're going to be just joined at the hip with these lines of business as they move through technically. We're going to continue to support and develop the technology and, of course, develop the new applications. But increasingly, they're going to have the flexibility and the capital and resources to really chase the commercialization journey.
And then talking about another one of these potential partnerships that really attracted a lot of attention. I know the audience is very interested in this EV transition as well. There's been a partnership with Pilbara. You're in the early stages at the moment for some spodumene processing. We'd love for you to just give that overview of how it's currently done. We know a lot of the processing actually goes offshore, even though a lot of the extractions in Australia now, and how this could play out if it is successful as you move forward towards that demonstration plant.
Yeah, very exciting deal for us as well. We announced a bit earlier in the year, and really the attraction here is a couple of things associated with our kiln versus the standard way to process spodumene, which is the main sort of source of lithium for lithium-ion batteries. And I can use my toilet roll again, because in a normal kiln, it's a rotary kiln and it rotates around, and you introduce the spodumene concentrate at one end and you heat it up. You drive some gases out of that spodumene concentrate, and out it comes the other end with a few pores in it, and you use solvents to help extract the lithium. And so that's the way it's done currently. You can't use small particles. They just get blown straight out the kiln. And so that's the way it's done. And Pilbara Minerals concentrate up spodumene and send it off to China to get that done. What's interesting about this deal with Pilbara is they're looking to use our calciner to process what they're calling their flotation fines. These are things that are lower in lithium concentration, but are basically waste. But if you can introduce it into our calciner and then convert that lithium into a convertible form at the bottom, you're processing a waste into a final product that can actually then go into a much higher concentration of lithium. And that's what they're looking to then export. So instead of exporting ore, we're going to be producing a lithium salt, which is a much more concentrated form of lithium. And so you lower the carbon footprint. And of course, the other thing, you can heat this thing with renewable energy. You can't do that with a rotary kiln. And so that's the other advantage of the technology, to lower the carbon footprint of the lithium you're producing. And the reason why that's important is one of the fastest EV growing markets is Europe. Europe are introducing a carbon tariff from 2023. They're going to be taking all of the things that go into EV production, and they're going to be looking at how can they lower their carbon footprint. And so for Australia to remain competitive, we actually have to look at how we're lowering the carbon footprint across all of our export markets. And this Pilbara Minerals MOU we've got developing into a joint venture is really a great first example of how we're going to try and do that in Australia.
Just those two avenues alone would be enough to keep anyone busy. But of course, Calix still has the opportunity looking into areas such as water, biotech, as well as advanced battery materials. Love for you just to provide that overview of some of the different areas that you're looking into as well for the viewers to understand.
Yeah, okay. I don't want to confuse people, so I'll try and keep it as simple and as focused as I can. But water, we've been in water for quite some time. We have our own little mine that mines a magnesium-based ore, and we process that into a magnesium hydroxide, it's called. It's basically just an alkalinity additive. And so we're trying to replace caustic soda and these sorts of things with magnesium hydroxide. That business we've been in since 2013. It's earning revenues. We're not just an R&D company. We actually earn revenues from that. And in fact, the majority of our revenues are now coming from the water part of our business. We've expanded into the States. We're growing quite nicely there as well. So that part of our business is like a direct and distributor sales model. If I pick another couple of the areas that we're looking into, I might have mentioned advanced batteries before. There we've been successful getting some grant funding from the Australian government. We're looking at a manganese-based cathode material. Now, manganese was the first sort of battery used in a Nissan Leaf. But the problem with your electric Nissan Leaf from a decade ago is the battery deteriorated after about 4 years. And so that's why the Teslas added cobalts and nickels and these sorts of things to make those batteries more robust. But of course, adding cobalts and nickels add cost. In fact, the manganese chemistry, if you can make it stable and make it work really well, is a much better solution. It's cheaper, it's safer, and as long as you can make it stable, it'll be the great basis for the mass market EV. And so we're really focusing on making a great stable manganese crystal in our calciner, and we're getting some great early results working with Deacon Uni, Battery Hub, and we've got 3 million funding from the Australian government. So we're really charging after the battery space as well. And then the last little space is biotech, and that's basically using the properties of a high surface area or active magnesium oxide in inhibiting biofilms. Simple as that. We've already got early sales in crop protection with a Dutch cooperative who are spraying it on their field onions, and they're replacing something called mancozeb, one of the most widely used fungicides in the world that is now banned by the EU after the summer that's just gone. And they need their farmers to control fungus. And so we're starting some early sales there. That's after 7 years of trials ourselves. And there's also applications of that particular product in other areas like marine coatings and even topical in health and pharma applications. So I know it sounds like a hell of a lot that we're trying to do, but there's so many applications of what this kiln can do. And we're going to be pursuing all of them as fast as we can, again, using similar business models that we've done now with the CO2 part of our business to help us get there.
And with that commercialization pathway as well, you have recently reported on FY21, really solid growth across the board, 36% for sales revenue up to around $19 million. Your gross margins also expanded as well, which is great to see with the factory coming online. Would love to just hear you provide those reflections about FY21 and what investors should be looking for as well moving forward for those growth drivers.
FY21, as you mentioned, was a good year for us. All of the growth and the consolidation of the US acquisition was coming through into our water revenue numbers. And then we get quite a bit of grant funding and contribution to help develop the sort of R&D components of our business. And that was still a solid number. And those grants are moving forward to another 2 to 3 years still to help us continue to develop the current projects we have. So that's an important part of our revenue as well. And in terms of gross margin, as we take costs out of the US business, which we're able to do with our technology, that acquisition, we can start to see those gross margins coming up nicely for us. In terms of the key levers moving forward, though, if I have a look at the different lines of business, we really want to try and emulate in the US what we did in Australia in our water business. We've established a market. We moved quite quickly to a decent percentage of that market, about 40% of the market in the space of about 3 years. In the US, we're only 11% of the market. Total market's about 100 million. So we'd love the US to emulate what happened here in Australia. So even on just sort of the revenue part of a business, there's some exciting things. But I think I mentioned the pipeline that's there for the CO2 projects. We've already announced 2 starting to move through into development, which is one with Adbri here in Australia and one with Tarmac in the UK to start to develop a lime calciner project with them. And so the application of that LEILAC technology I mentioned before is starting to come forward in memorandums of understanding for projects. And they're just 2 of 4 in quite advanced stages of discussion. There's 7 where we're doing scoping, and there's another 21 where initial discussions have started. So as that pipeline starts to move through, the next 12 months is going to be really quite interesting as we get those projects through the pipeline and start to announce them. And of course, some of the projects that we've already announced, say with Pilbara Minerals, for example, scoping study is currently underway. If that's successful, we move through to joint venture announcement, hopefully early next year, all going well. And so even in some of the smaller parts of our business, there's some really interesting stuff that can continue to drive, the proof, I guess, of commercialization application of the core technology. So lots happening, basically, yeah.
Lots happening. Of course, there's so much for you to focus on, but I'd love to just hear any reflections that you have as the CEO. How much attention are you paying to the share price? CXL is up by over 500% over the past year. I think ASX CXL was up by 40% just on the back of the recent announcement of the investment from Carbon Direct. How does that feel for you? And yeah, what are your reflections about it over this past period?
I think that there's an old saying that, overnight success is after 10 years of really hard work. We don't count it as success though yet. I mean, I think what the market's starting to see is the fact that we can deliver on the commercial milestones that we're targeting. We can deliver on the execution of the business strategy, and particularly with this deal that we've done with Carbon Direct. And I think the market's starting to recognise the capability of the company and the technology to deal with these enormous global challenges that we have in front of us. And then B, the amount of interest in companies that can deal with these global challenges as well, which is only increasing. So I think it's a combination of both of those things. The steps that we've been able to make and continue to make, and our ambition, and of course, the need to do it with respect to the state of the planet, and also the investment funds that are starting to flow into those types of themes. So combination of several things, I guess, that's driven that growth.
And you've mentioned it's been a long journey. Of course, you've had some shareholders all the way through from the IPO. So for those longer term investors who have been following ASX CXL, or those who might have just been getting familiar with the CXL story recently, did you have any final reflections or thoughts that you wanted to share with them?
Yeah, look, obviously for the ones that have been there for the longest journey, and in a lot of cases, that's actually management and staff. We put our own money into this company in 2014. We got it through and bootstrapped it to our IPO in 2018 without raising any more funding. And so for those people who've been there for a long time, including my colleagues, and it's great to see the fruits of their labour starting to come off. And so for their support, that's been fantastic. And of course, our early investors. There's been some particular early investment by Thorney, Alex Weislitz, by Acorn, by Washington H. Sol Patterson, and then increasingly we've had great support coming in from Australian Super. Regal's now joined the register, and so these Australian institutionals that are backing early stage investment companies have been really fundamental to our success. And then of course, any shareholder who's come on since, I'm also very grateful for their support, and hopefully their continued support moving forward on our journey.
That is the Calix story. It's ASX CXL. If you guys did enjoy the video, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button and feel free to share it out as well. If you're new here, welcome. We do daily videos, so make sure you've subscribed and turn your bell notifications on. Phil, it was an absolute pleasure. I really enjoyed unpacking the story. You're doing incredible stuff, so we'll be looking forward to seeing where you head from here.
Thank you so much for having me on, and thanks all out there for your interest and support in our company.
Thanks so much. We'll see you soon.